0, 1. Let's get started.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Texas Narcos Podcast. Very excited today to have special guests Al Clark and Bauer Brown from ACE Interdiction Tactics. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excited to be on.
Yes, sir. Thank y'all for coming on. I know it's been a long day and y'all been traveling and everything, so I appreciate y'all taking time out of your day to come on the show. Normally at this time, we would give a gift to both of y'all. Y'all will get y'all's gifts tomorrow. You'll both get Texas Narcos hats. So I will give those to y'all tomorrow. So we got a lot of stuff to cover, so we'll go ahead and jump in. Bauer, tell us where you from, kind of how'd you grow up? How'd you get to where you're at now as far as, coming from where you're coming from to how you got here?
Sure. So I grew up in Arizona, and I grew up in the area in which I currently work, and grew up in a family of hunters and cops, and that's kind of how I've lived my life and what I am now.
Yeah.
My dad was a commander for the current agency that I work for now, and I knew from a very early age, before I could even think of doing anything else, I wanted to be a cop, and that's the only thing that I've ever wanted to do. Watching my dad in law enforcement, it kind of, I guess, built that up in me, wanting to become a cop, and ended up working for a local agency in the area in which I grew up, and then eventually transferred over to a county agency in SO that my dad worked for ultimately, and been there ever since, and still hunting and doing the cop work, and that's pretty much my life.
Yeah.
Other than family and kids,
Gotcha.
what I do.
So hunting, as in hunting the four-legged animals as well as the smugglers.
Yes,
So-
both. It's kind of funny you make that comparison, because I know a lot of really, really good interdictors that it's funny, the correlation between hunting on the highway and then also, hunting in the real world,
Right.
four-legged animals, as you call
Yeah.
them. It's interesting to see the comparison between both. Like, typically it comes in that way, where you're a good hunter, you're a good interdictor, probably because the patient side of it. You got to be the patient hunter when you're hunting four-legged animals, and then when you're on the roadway, you got to have some type of patience, even though that's really not my strong suit. But it's there. You got to dig deep and somehow be patient and watch cars all day. But
Yeah.
you definitely see a noticeable comparison when somebody's a good interdictor. A lot of times they're some type of hunter, it seems like.
Right. So now, with hunting, you like deer, elk? What kind of stuff do you hunt?
Well, if I could ever draw deer in an elk tag, yes, that's the case. In Arizona, it's a draw, so it's kind of hard to draw some of those units in Arizona. But if I don't get a tag, I'm more of a predator hunter. So I do a lot of like calling coyotes and bobcats and stuff like that. Is what I'll go for, because in Arizona you don't have to draw for that. You can just go out and do it with a regular hunting license. And so, since the Game and Fish doesn't want to give me any tags, I guess I'm stuck with just hunting the stuff I can get without drawing. So
Gotcha.
kind of what I do most of the time.
All right, cool. Al, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you came from and how you got into law enforcement? And
Yeah, I number one, I want to thank you for having us on here. I grew up in Utah, northern Utah,
okay,
and as a young man, I migrated down to Arizona. I tested my skills at welding for about 10 years. Didn't do so well.
Yeah.
And but I had a deep desire to be a cop for a long time. Finally ventured out into that world, and I've been there ever since. I worked one career with the Naval Police Department,
okay,
which is a reservation up northern Arizona. It encompasses 3 states. about the size of West Virginia.
Wow.
And worked there for one career. And during that time, I was fortunate to be able to be instrumental in starting the K9 unit and work interdiction there. It's kind of where I cut my teeth.
Awesome.
After retiring there, I went to the sheriff's office where I currently work and continued with the interdiction world and on a task force where I currently am.
I got you. So just to be clear, both you guys are at the same agency?
Yep.
And y'all both work full-time highway interdiction?
Correct.
Okay. Awesome. Bauer, I'll ask you this question. How did ACE Interdiction Tactics kind of get it started? How did y'all get,
Yeah.
how did this get birthed?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, there's a couple different ways I can start it, but I guess I'll start it with this. I was approached by a different company early on in my career, asking if I would come teach.
Okay.
And I said yes, and kind of was waiting on them to start me up teaching with them, and ultimately it just kind of never happened. It was kind of interesting, and it just never happened. Even though they'd reached out to me a few different times, and I guess we just never really connected. And so I've always had an interest in business and entrepreneurship. And so I had an interest in teaching. I had an interest in entrepreneurship, starting my own business, and ultimately said, well, if I have an interest in both of those, maybe I'll just start my own. So I'd actually approached Al and I said, hey, what do you think about this? And he didn't say much, so he didn't seem that interested. And I was like, fine. Well, never really happened, and we went about our lives. And then I started to think about it a little bit more as I've got, some experience under my belt, more experience under my belt as an interdiction officer. I thought, I think we could do this, especially with Al's experience, being very extensive, 20 plus years in interdiction. I thought, man, we can probably pull this off and pull it together. And so I finally got Al on board, and we actually started it in 2020. And if you remember how 2020 was, it was probably the worst year that you could possibly start any type of company that requires several people to gather in one room together.
Yeah.
And so we had launched our first class before they had really put the restrictions down, and we had agencies paying us. I mean, we saw money in our bank account for the first time as a company, and then we were basically told, "Hey, man, we can't do it. This is the heat of COVID, and we can't gather, so you're gonna have to cancel the class." And so our very first class was canceled, and we had to refund all this money.
That sucks.
And so it was, yeah, definitely one of the worst times to start a business. So ultimately, that's kind of what kicked it off. Early on, I had some teachers in my lect where I was like, dude, like, do you guys even care about what you're teaching?
Right.
Like, you guys just like show up and write on the whiteboard, and you're not even saying any words. And I'm like, are you guys gonna actually teach the students? And I'm not talking about interdiction. I'm talking about just regular school and college. And then that kind of, piqued my interest in actually instructing and teaching and being able to take a topic and break it down so people can understand it a lot better. And so I just kind of put those two together with wanting to start a company with my interdiction career and kind of having a desire to instruct. And then that's when I approached Al and said, hey, you want to do this? And next thing you know, here we are.
All right. So what all classes does ACE Interdiction Tactics offer?
Perfect. That's a good question. Initially, when we started the company, it was just going to be me and Al teaching an interdiction tactics 2-day class.
Okay.
We didn't really have. I mean, we never discussed an idea of growing at that point. It was, we'll just teach our classes and maybe branch out, and we'll ourselves maybe teach a different topic here and there. And then ultimately, it kind of turned into more than that as we started to grow and get a little bit more popular within the instructing world of interdiction. And then I started seeing just the phenomenal talent that was already out there teaching. And then we got lucky, and Jeremy Bedingfield was in the process of looking elsewhere to teach. And somehow we landed him over here at ACE Interdiction Tactics, and we got him. And we just recently added another instructor, which he's going to teach more of the investigative type gang and narcotic work, and he's got a lot of very high profile cases. I'm talking about high profile cases. I'm talking about as far as infiltrating into jails and prisons with informants and solving a lot of homicide cases in the gang world. in the narcotic world. So we actually keep his name off of any public platform.
Right.
But he teaches a class called Infiltrate that will be a phenomenal class that we're launching in 2025.
Okay.
And then aside from that, we just got Nick Bonney on from Nebraska, and he's going to teach consensual encounters and partial interdiction. Just
Okay.
a non-traditional way, as he calls it,
Right.
at interdicting. And the guy is absolutely phenomenal. I love it because he's sending me, content for his class and body cam of him, whether it's parcels or interdicting somebody in an Amtrak or a bus station, and doing these consensual encounters and developing reasonable suspicion, and just the phenomenal way that he, talks to people.
Right.
And then with that, I talked about Jeremy Bedingfield, but I didn't talk much about his class. I'm convinced, I know I'm biased because he teaches for us, but I'm convinced that this guy is one of the only instructors teaching this type of class that has as much access to compartments as this guy does.
Right.
And it's everything from his own stops, his own cold stops, to his own stops that he helps out any other agencies or investigations with. And he helps people search cars. I'm convinced that if there's a trap that's hit in his area, he's probably has something to do with it, whether helping him find it or was there. And this guy has so much exposure to searching vehicles and locating very sophisticated compartments,
Right.
that he's definitely one of the best in the nation. And we're lucky to have all three of those instructors. I mean, I'm just completely mind boggled that we have that opportunity and that we're growing, and we've got some really good things coming, especially in 2025.
That's awesome. So how many classes do you and Al put on a year on average?
So we put on about 12. So we try to teach once a month, and there will usually be a couple months of the year where we will double up on that. So we'll usually do a double header, either let's say probably 1, 2, or 3 months out of the year. We try to hit a double header in those months.
Okay.
So on average, I'd say 12, at most probably 15.
Okay. And your other classes, do they make their own schedule, or do you handle all that stuff? Is there, I guess what I'm getting at, is there like, where can people go to one central place to check out your schedules for all your classes?
Sure. All of our classes are listed at aceinterdiction.com.
Okay.
And so that will have our class on there, mine and Al's class, which we teach interdiction tactics. That's a 2-day class. It's our only 2-day class. And the reason it's 2 days, I mean, we're going very in depth on the entire interdiction stop. So it's not necessarily just one topic with interdiction. We're taking you from, the very beginning of before you ever jump in the median to look at cars, all the way to courtroom testimony. So you can find our class, our 2-day class, on the website. You'll find Jeremy's Cartel Traps on the website, Nick Bonney, and our other instructor who teaches Infiltrate. Their class will be on the website as well. We're still looking for hosts for Nick's and the Infiltrate class.
Mm-hmm.
And so those will be launching in 2025. So they're not up yet, but you'll be seeing them here in the next 2 months start to pop out for 2025 schedule.
Awesome. And you also have a podcast too?
We do. What's funny about our podcast is we started this back in 2020. As a matter of fact, it was a very low budget webcam, no microphone type podcast that we initially started just doing live on our Facebook group that we have that's specific to law enforcement. And we started doing those. I think we got up to like 20 episodes and then slowed down on those. And then we kind of revamped it and decided, hey, we'll do a couple more lives. And then we got busy. We didn't get anything, accomplished like we were going to. We went a couple different avenues on some of the things that we were doing with the business. And then we started back up and we actually moved it to a public platform. So we have the ACE Podcast. It's like on Spotify and YouTube now. And we're putting out episodes every 2 or 3 months. It's slow, but it's starting to pick up a lot more.
Well, it's a lot of work. I can speak to that. I started this show back in June of this year, just as a idea I had one day, and just kind of jumped into it with both feet. And I can tell you, it is I won't say it's a full-time job, but it's definitely a struggle to make sure that you have content to put out every week for people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so between that and your teaching and your actual, your job, your full-time job, I can imagine that you guys are burning the candle at both ends.
Yeah, I feel that way.
So cool. Is there anything that you want to add to any of that?
I just, on the starting up, I'll tell you, I've enjoyed being able to be a part of this and to, we went into this wanting to share. Not that we know it all, but we wanted to share what works for us, our
Right.
tactics that we use on the streets every day, and it's been a joy to meet officers around the country, and there's some great people out there, and it's been a joy to be able to meet them one on one and
Right.
in a classroom environment.
Yeah.
It's very enjoyable.
Yeah. That's you know, the one of the reasons that I started the podcast in the beginning was because um during my career, I've been in the field for 17 years now. I've met a bunch of really, really cool, I guess you want to call them old timers, or, people that have been doing this for years and years and years. And, I can tell you how many times I've been at their desks, or, wherever in their office, and we're just sitting there talking, and they're just telling these stories, from back in the day. And a lot of those guys aren't here with us anymore. They've passed away. So that was one of the things that I wanted to do. Was I wanted to try to have a platform to capture the stories of our craft, the stories that are passed down from, say, generation to generation of cops, right? And I wanted to get that stuff on recording so that the next generation can hear about, the stuff, because I mean, they're not going to be here forever, right? So there was that part of it. And then also I wanted a platform to where I could talk to the people who are at the top of their game, whether it be interdiction, whether it be undercover work, whatever it is, and give them a chance to get their message and their experiences and their training and knowledge and experience and stuff out there to people, in a platform that they don't have to, pay to go to a class or travel or whatever. Obviously we're not going to teach a class on a podcast, but um at least impart some knowledge on some people, if anything else.
Sure.
Just spark that interest. Plus, I think people like to hear just cool stories, and so that's what I'm trying to do here. But so cool. All right, so let's jump in here to why don't we talk about your first big cash seizure, Bauer?
Okay. Well, when I first started, I really had no interest in working cash.
Right.
I wanted to work the dope side, and that's all I wanted to work. And Al was working the cash side, and so yeah, as a two-man team, uh, he worked west, I worked east,
Right.
and that's just kind of how it worked. And he was the guy seizing all the cash. So when I first started, I'm gonna be honest, I was a little bit more intimidated by the cash side.
Right.
I just felt like I needed to really understand, smuggling to fully articulate my reasonable suspicion, ultimately my probable cause when I was going to be seizing money, and I was a little bit intimidated by it. So my first big cash seizure was actually my first cash. Well, it was my second, but my first cash seizure was about $23,000. My second cash seizure, which was my biggest, was not that big according to a lot of the interdictors that are
Right.
probably going to be coming on your podcast and instructors out there, but it was around 145,000. And I think the interesting part about this particular cash seizure was it wasn't on your traditional highway, it wasn't on your interstate. It was actually on a back road in Arizona. That's pretty common, or a pretty common route to avoid the interstates.
Okay.
And we get an opportunity to debrief a lot of people who utilize this highway for smuggling, and that's exactly what they tell us is, hey man, we're using this highway to avoid
Right.
the main artery, the interstates. We know those dogs are up there. And so this was on a smaller highway. So I think it should give a lot of your listeners or some of those proactive cops out
Right.
there a little bit of hope that, a lot of this stuff, isn't necessarily on the big highways. There's a lot of roads that parallel those big roads that you can have a lot of good success on, such as this. So
Right.
I stopped a car, and it's son, who's probably about 20, 26 years old, and then mom is with him. I want to say she's 50 something years old, and then a small little nephew of mom,
Right.
kind of giving off a family look, if you will, which I think was ultimately their goal.
Right.
And started going into a more interdiction style stop, bringing him back and having a conversation with the driver. And based on, good deceptive cues and a lot of stuff that we've been teaching all day today, really quickly developed reasonable suspicion that there's definitely more than just the innocent motoring public that's passing through here, and they're definitely more consistent with somebody involved in criminal activity. And
Right.
ultimately asked him for consent to search, and he hawed around and gave me consent initially, and then said, "You know what? I would rather just get going." And ultimately deployed my canine at the time, and who alerted to the vehicle and searched the vehicle. And ultimately ended up finding about 145,000 in cash. So I confronted him on it, and I just simply asked him, man, like, "Hey, man, why don't you just tell me he was in here
Yeah.
to deal with this?" And he eventually told me that it's not his, that he's going to buy some land with the cash in California. And I said, "Okay, just you need to be honest with me. I need to know this stuff. And who are you buying land for?" I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Where are you buying land? And basically after, debriefing him and trying to get more information on this money, the whole story changed and the truth came out on basically what was happening with the money. And we got some pretty good information on that case as well, and a pretty decent money seizure of 145,000, which isn't a whole lot compared to like this guy over here, but it was a good seizure for me for sure.
Now, was this in a compartment, or was this just in a bag? Or
So no, it wasn't in a compartment. It was funny story. When I searched the car, I thought it was going to be a compartment,
Mhm.
and kind of based on what I saw with registrations and different things, I was okay, it's going to be a pretty deep hide. Um, and so we start searching the car, and as we search cars, we take things out, and I'm really just wanting to get to the base of the car. I
Right.
want to start looking to see if I can see anything aftermarket, and I moved a lot of stuff around. One of the things that I moved around was a box that you would put like a battery jumper cable box in,
Mhm.
And I moved this thing around like 15 different times because I just wanted to get to the car and start looking for anything aftermarket or any type of compartments. And I had taken a lot of stuff out of the car, and I eventually got to that. And I said, you know what? If I'm taking stuff out of the car, this is one of the number one rules that we teach, but I wasn't following it at the time. I was like, I better search this before I remove it from the car. And little did I know I had moved the money around probably 6 or 7 times, and then
Nice.
opened up the box the battery cable jumper was in, and that's where all the cash is.
Nice.
Hidden. So
Now, was this particular case, and if you can't talk about it, it's fine. I get it. Was this a specifically a cash smuggler, or was this a person that had run a load to a destination, gotten cash on delivery, and was bringing the money back, or was this specifically just a cash courier?
So this actually turned into a little bit of a bigger investigation.
Mhm.
This was a cold stop. I didn't have any prior information, but ultimately what happened is, based on the information that we got from him, we were able to come up with charges of money laundering. So
Mhm.
ultimately, he was charged, but we did get additional information, and he was not specifically a cash smuggler. Now, whether or not he was going to actually pick up with that money,
Right.
probably not necessarily the case. He was probably just running cash on this run, from what I can tell. But later, we did find out through a few different agencies that he was definitely involved in cocaine smuggling.
I got you. Cool. Al, sounds like you're the cash guy.
I like to work the cash side of things when I can. I don't know that I'm that good at it, but my first cash seizure, was on a 2-lane highway that went north from Flagstaff
Mhm.
up through Page and on up through Utah, and it was coming back to Phoenix from I think it was Salt Lake City, and it was an old Crown Vic. The Crown Vics used to be notorious for the firewall compartment,
Okay.
and
You're kind of showing your age here a little bit, but
I
just
know
keep going.
it's
Keep
look at me.
going.
But anyway, I was able to locate some tampering and some things. You'd pull the molding off the side, and you could see that there was 4 bolts that would hold the dash on, and they were heavily tooled. Ultimately, we took it back to the shop, and this is at Navajo PD, and so this was really unique and new for our agency. But it had vacuum sealed bundles of cash all the way across it. It was like 160,000. It was interesting because they'd slit the firewall on the dash side, and then would pry it open and put the packages in and then close it. And there was shards of meth in there.
Nice.
So yeah, you could tell they'd been using it both directions.
Right. Right.
But at that time, 89 was basically in the Arizona side was unscathed. I mean, nobody worked it. That's where I cut my teeth and kind of learned the trade a little bit. And the more I worked it, and it's not like an interstate. You're not going to hit like that, but I mean, it's pretty reliable. It's a lot of weight moving up and down the road. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't remember that much more about it.
Yeah. So, in your experience working the cash and stuff, do you see more often that the people will um, take dope one direction and then turn around and the same courier brings the cash back? Or do you think they compartmentalize it more and have people that just run dope and people that just run cash? Or do you think they kind of do a little bit of both?
You know, when I first started, I remember finding getting cash loads that were in traps with, residue from dope. And
Mm-hmm.
you could tell they were running both directions with this particular vehicle in these traps. But as time has gone on, I feel like there's more compartmentalization going on. I think there's money couriers. I think we hit people that are just couriering money. In fact, I know for sure we have through investigations. And then, of course, we've got our dope going the other way in
Right.
different vehicles. And I think they do that because um, they don't want you to set up on them and try to pick the money off going back. I mean,
Right.
there's probably a lot of reasons why, but
Yeah.
in the later part of my career, that seems to be the way I've been able to see it.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense. I
The
mean,
way the trends are.
yeah, it makes sense to be more specialized, because I mean, there's a lot of, a lot of tradecraft on both sides, on our side and their side,
Oh, yeah.
when it comes to how we catch them and how they avoid being caught. But, it would make sense to try to not get, not get caught up by our investigative tools, that they don't use the same car to go both
Sure.
ways,
Yeah. Mhm.
Exactly. You know, I had, not to cut you off, but I had one load that we debriefed, and they actually admitted to watching YouTube videos and packaging so the dogs wouldn't alert on. They gave
Yeah.
consent, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you run a dog too? Or do you still run a
yeah,
dog?
yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, 26 years, I believe.
Wow.
Handling.
How many dogs have you had during that time?
I think about 9.
9?
Yeah, I think so.
And have they all been just drugs? Or are they dual purpose, or have you done
Well,
both?
I've
Or
had a mixture. I started out, I'm going way back here and telling my age, but my very first dog was a Rottweiler,
nice.
and he was bite only, patrol only, and then that was short lived. And then I got a little shepherd that was kind of homegrown. I raised him as a pup
Yeah.
and I trained him and got him certified. And he was dual purpose, but he really wasn't. He was more of a drug dog.
Yeah.
And then from then on, I got dual purpose dogs. So my first dog with the county though was single purpose, drugs only. And then we kind of switched that up too. So
Right.
it's kind of gone back and forth.
And how about you, Bauer? Are you dual purpose or
Yeah.
single, or what are you?
Dual purpose. I'm on my second dog, so I've been a canine handler since 2016. So almost 9 years now.
Yeah.
And I'm on my second dog. My first dog initially was just dope in handler protection. We had admin at our agency at that time that was more on the, hey, we'll just do handler protection side. We won't use them a whole lot for patrol. And then when I got my new dog, it kind of switched it up to, yeah, we're going to use it as full blown patrol, and kind of switched towards that. And so he's full blown patrol, meaning he'll bite, but he does great dope work as well.
Do y'all's dogs do tracks too?
Yeah, so I mean, it's more of the way we work it is not necessarily tracking. I mean, it's more of a send them into an area doing an area search typically. But if it's going to be a long trail, we actually have a program set up in our agency where if it looks like it's going to be a trail for a ways, instead of tiring out the mouths and then the Dutch Shepherd like Al has, because those dogs just, I mean, they just pull and pull and pull when they want to go bite. They
Right.
just get worn out so fast. So we actually have a program that Al started in our agency where if it's going to be an extensive track, we have 2 tracking hounds, and so
Okay.
we'll run those first to track, and they're phenomenal.
Right.
They're patient, and they're very tedious with the way that they search, and so we can control the Mal and the Dutch Shepherd behind them while they run the track, and
Okay.
if we get close and we can locate somebody, then we'll send the dog in on it.
And y'all, I guess y'all have your own. There's another set of handlers that handles those guys.
So we have one handler that handles two tracking hounds. Yep.
Nice. On the topic of dogs, what advice would you give to a young cop who wants to get into being a canine? Like, everybody's like, oh, I want a dog. I want a dog. Well, it's kind of like with the dope work, I say this all the time. Everybody wants to be a narc until it's time to do narc stuff, right? So, everybody thinks it's, 2-hour lunches and, getting off early on Fridays or not coming in at all on Fridays. But then, people don't know about the 2-3 o'clock in the mornings and, the things that are really involved with it. So
Yeah.
what advice or, guidance would you give to a new guy, or didn't have to be a new guy, but just a cop that's wanting to get into canine business?
Well, I think I'll start with this really quick before I jump into that is I think an agency needs to be careful. I think the agency needs to understand who they should pick to be a canine.
Right.
Because I see a lot of canine programs fail. I've seen several canine programs fail because the agency probably didn't do the best selection process
Yeah.
for their canine handler. And the reason I say that is I'm not knocking on anybody, but I mean, it's just, all your listeners are going to know exactly what I'm talking about. You
Yeah.
typically have 2 types of handlers. You have the handler that's a handler for the status, the Instagram pictures of the dog, hanging through the partition.
Yeah.
And that wants to, have his dog out everywhere he goes, and it's the status, man. I'm a canine handler. I got a badass dog, and I understand. I mean, it's really cool to have a dog, but I do think there's a lot of people who want to get into canine for that reason. It's the status of it, and then a lot of canine programs will probably take you off of handle and patrol calls, so you get off of that,
Right.
and a little bit less work. And so, I mean, I think agencies need just to be careful of that specific type of handler that wants it for the status. I actually had no desire to be a canine, never thought about being a canine until I started working interdiction in an area where there was no canine at all. And I realized, holy shit, I think if I'm going to do this, for the majority of my career, I either need one here, I need to get one myself, or need someone by.
Yeah.
So I became a canine handler, and then I fell in love with it. So with all that being said and me rambling on, the advice I would give to somebody who wants to become a canine handler is if your agency's doing the right selection process, they're probably going to want somebody who is a go-getter and who's proactive.
Right.
So they want to put that dog to work. They're investing a lot of money into these programs, man. Dogs now fully trained are going at 20 grand plus all the upkeep.
Yeah.
And if you're going to invest that amount of money, you probably want some return on your investment. So you want to choose a handler who is already out there trying to go and get dope and arrest bad guys as it is. And he's not going to be the canine handler that's going to sit and wait for somebody to call him to come. He's going to be one making the stops and finding the dope himself.
Yeah.
If I was somebody selecting for a canine process, I'm looking for the proactive guy on the unit that's already going out there trying to find it, and that this tool will be utilized for him, but also the guys around him if they need. But this guy alone is out there kicking ass and is a go-getter. So I think you should go out there, be a go-getter, go hunt dope yourself, and then show that you're on the hunt. And then, I think that would help you in your selection process.
Yeah. And then also, I'm assuming the understanding that having a dog is not a 8 to 5 job, and it's not even, I mean, you're always responsible for that dog. You have to take care of it. It has to, it probably has to live with you, I would imagine. I don't know how y'all do, if y'all's dogs go to a kennel at night, offsite, or if they stay with y'all, or, like it's a around the clock
24/7.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So,
my words would be to, not only like Bauer hit the nail right on the head, but I would like to add that, if you think you're interested, I mean, go train with the guys in your area that have dogs. Go out and experience it and see what it's like. Talk to them. They're going to tell you about the awful smells in their cars and all the dog hair everywhere, the upkeep it takes to keep a clean car.
Yeah.
It's not all as glamorous as people think it is, I think. I mean, I love it. I can't I can't imagine not having a dog at work. However, it's a lot of upkeep. It's a ton of responsibility to do the right thing, and there's tons of liability that come with it. And so all those, in the totality of all that, I mean, they just need to consider all that. I mean, do they have a home life where they can babysit a dog that can't
Yeah.
really be out in the public?
Yeah.
Secure it and everything, and when they're out of town, I mean, are they going to have somebody to help them take care of it and all that kind of stuff? So,
Yeah.
but I think if you can, oh yeah, we've had some horror stories, but I mean, you know, more than anything, I mean, if you're going to test the water, you might as well go out, and that's how I learned. I went out and trained with canine handlers, putting on the bite suit and catching dogs, and that's how I started. And man, I fell in love with it.
Yeah.
And it was really neat. So
That's awesome. Let's go back into, we'll get back on the dope thing now. So what was your first big dope seizure as an interdiction officer?
well, and I need everybody to know and understand I fell into this. This was not, it wasn't very graceful, but I was working 89 and 160 on the reservation, and first I'll explain how I learned a little bit about interdiction, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I was, and I say this with modesty, but I was a DUI hound. I hunted DUIs like no other. I set my goals were to get a DUI a shift,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes more than that if I could. But that was my thing. I 10-8, I go out to work and I hunted DUIs aggressively, and I worked for the tribe. However, I worked in an area where the state police or the highway patrolman also shared the area with me, and we had a friendly competition where we both were out aggressively trying to find, locate, and arrest DUIs.
Right.
And so it became a little friendly competition. Well, he transferred out of the area and transferred down about 80 miles south of where I was at. I was up in the Page area in Arizona, and he transferred down south. It'd be kind of the Cameron or the gateway to the south rim of the Grand Canyon area. And this is back before cell phones, so we contacted each other through ground line,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how we communicate. But anyway, he calls me one night and he's like, "Hey, man, it's the craziest thing." He says, "I made a stop and I got a load of drugs." He says it was, I think it was like 40 something pounds of marijuana. And this is what I refer to as the old ditch weed. It was bricks of weed.
Yeah.
And he was telling me about it, and I was like, "Good grief, how do you do that?" And he goes, "Well, you got to try it. You got to start doing this. This is so much better than DUIs. Like, this is the new thing. I'm hooked on it." Well, he went on to get one or two more, and I was just, I mean, that's how I learned. I'd call him on the phone and press him for information, like, "Tell me how you do this." And his information was, well, stop, people passing through, like out of state plates. Like, that's how I do it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if anybody's ever been in that region, they get probably 3 million visitors a year. And so there's a lot out of state plates and a lot of a lot of people passing through your innocent motoring public. Anyway, it took me a long time to try and go through this phase and of learning. And that's why I say I just stumbled into it. One night I was working, and it was probably 2 a.m. I was headed back in, and I got behind this RV. I want to say it was Florida plated. I can't remember for sure. And it was kind of weaving and bobbing, and I was like, "Well, I'm almost into town. I'll make one more stop and call it a night." And I remember going up and talking to the driver, and at that time I followed the Phoenix Suns and their schedule a little bit. And he's telling me it was him and two passengers, and he was telling me that they'd just come from a Phoenix Suns game, were headed back home. And I was like, "Man, they didn't play." So I questioned him on that. And
Mm-hmm.
he was like, "No, we just left, you know." And I asked him who they played, and none of this made sense because I knew they didn't play. And anyway, I got to visiting with him a little bit, stumbled through the conversation, asked for consent, and he literally walked me around the RV and was lifting up the hatches underneath where you store things. He got to this particular hatch on the passenger side in the back and opened the door and shut it real quick. And I could see like a wall, maybe 6 inches deep. There was a steel wall or metal wall. And I said, wait a minute, lift that back up. And I saw fresh caulking, and my heart kind of started picking up a little bit. And I opened another door, and I could see all the way through, and I opened this one, and it stopped. And I asked him about, that's nothing. And he wanted to move along. And I don't know why I was letting him search the car with me, but I was. And this is how uneducated I was. Anyway, I told him I was going to run the dog because I was suspicious of this particular petition in that door, or past the door. I get my dog out and run him, and sure enough, he alerts on that spot. And I get some help there, and I had been told to carry a drill with a drill bit, and so I did have that, and I drilled a hole through this thing, and I brought the drill bit back out, and it was weed on the drill bit. And I'll never forget it, man. I was so excited. I didn't know what I had on the other side of that wall, but I had weed.
Hell yeah.
And I showed my sergeant, he was on scene, and I showed him, and he goes, I said, look, there's drugs in there. There's marijuana on my drill bit. And he goes, well, I need proof. And so, again, my inexperience, we got a couple of pry bars and sledgehammers and started beating this wall down and tearing it down. Come to find out, if you went inside the RV and went to the queen size bed, there was a trap lever, and the bed lifts up, and there's your access,
Nice.
right? But we didn't do it that way. It took us a while to beat the wall down, and it was like 750 pounds of weed.
Nice.
It was the old 25-pound bundles wrapped in shelving paper. I don't what.
Like that wallpaper stuff.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Paper stuff.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So that was my first experience. I walked on clouds for about 2 weeks. Super, super excited. I mean, to tell you, I was hooked. Yeah.
No more DWIs.
Yeah. I was over that.
Yeah.
I was over that.
These felonies now.
Yeah.
No more misdemeanors.
That's awesome. That's awesome. How about you, Bauer?
Biggest load, or what are we talking? First load, or
This is your
first load.
This is your
Was that
first
my
big
first
load.
load? Oh
Yeah.
gosh, well, my first load wasn't big, but and it was a nightmare of a shit show, kind of like Al was talking about. How it even got prosecuted, I'll never know, because I didn't know what I was doing much either. But I had this was right around the time where actually medicinal marijuana was pretty new, not recreational, but medicinal. And Arizona had kind of, started to pass that, and we were a little bit confused and hadn't got a whole lot of direction on how we were going to really work this with marijuana dogs. And this was, like I said, medicinal, and about 10 years ago. And I stopped this car, and I smell the weed. I mean, it's obvious that this is going to be loaded, but I didn't know, and this is lack of knowledge on my part, and advice to you interdictors out there: always be updating yourself on case law and talking with your attorneys and different things. And that's something that I failed to do. And so I smell all this weed coming out of this car, but I knew we had just passed medicinal marijuana in Arizona. He's handing me a medical marijuana card, and I'm confused. Can I search this? Can I not search this? I don't know, right? Brand new at interdiction. I've been doing it for about 8 weeks. So I call him and I say, hey man, can you, what do I do in this situation? Is it okay if I just search it based on the odor? And he's like, well, you know what? We haven't really come to any conclusion on that or anything. So why don't you just go ahead and run your dog, and maybe you'll be the one that makes the case law, and we'll figure it all out. So I was nervous. I ended up running my dog, and clearly he alerted, and we searched it, and it was about 40 pounds of weed. That was my first load ever. Like I said, I mean, just stumbled through it, but it was an experience, and I definitely learned from it. Definitely learned what I should not do and should do. And then, it actually did go to a suppression hearing, which was great for me. Scary, but you will not learn, quicker and more information than going to your first suppression hearing and finding out exactly what the defense is looking at to get rid of your case. So it was a great learning experience for me.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I had a case, I think over the summer, it went all the way to the Fifth Circuit, and they reviewed it, and they upheld the district court's opinion, and so it worked out good for the government.
Yeah,
it got upheld. So, but yeah, it was definitely like, oh no, I don't want a case law with my name on it. So, but it all worked out. So, well, cool. We're gonna hop off here for today, and we will be back next week with part 2 with Al and Bauer. So we'll see you guys next week on Texas Narcos. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Texas Narcos Podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Remember to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, share our podcast with your friends and family. You can find Texas Narcos Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. Your continued support helps us to bring you stories like the one you just heard. Thank you, God bless, and we'll see you down the road on Texas Narcos.